The green stuff. They're all green cushions. Where are we going to sit?
Sit on the chair with the green cushion. Right.
Yeah, you've got to sit on the wall. We're going to move.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a party.
Janet, welcome to Derby.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving up your time, because I know you are a very, very busy person.
Well, you know, it's especially good to come to Derby because Simon Groom, who I was on repeating with for many years, is from Mclean, just outside, and he is such a big fan of the quad and Derby, so it's lovely to come to his hometown. Really
Because
nice.
he did some work here and helped sort of establish it. I
He
think.
did, yeah. He did. He's done a good job.
So I want to ask you first, what are your memories of getting your MBE in 2016?
Do you know, when I got the letter at home, it looked like, you remember those things that used to come a lot in the post that said, you probably won about £12,000.
Yes.
You buy the Reader's Digest for a year or something. And I thought it was one of those, because it looked sort of bizarrely official, if you know what I mean. Obviously, I've never had anything from the Palace Thank You before, and it's, you know, won't happen again. But when I opened it, I just thought, and my first thought, and I don't want to sound twee, is this is, first of all I could think of a load of other people that should be similarly rewarded, but I just thought this is so good for the charities I support, you know, because they, like all charities, they put in so much work, and their names need to come to the top every so often, and anything you can do to help. And apart from that, what to wear? What are they going to wear to Buckingham Palace?
Well, you absolutely deserved it, so thank you.
Thank you.
You just mentioned your charity work, so I want to ask you about, is it Maggie's?
Yeah, Maggie's Cancer Centres.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit about that, what that charity does and what it's all about, please?
Maggie's are extraordinary, actually. They're named after a woman called Maggie Jenks, who was a landscape architect, which is important. And her husband, Charles Jenks, was actually president of the Royal Institution of British Architects, RBA, for a while. And when she was diagnosed with cancer and going through her treatment, she realised that you're not necessarily going to be waiting in the hospital to have things done or be recovering afterwards in a particularly lovely place. You know, I'm a big fan of the NHS, and as she would have said, the treatment she had was great. But when you have that sort of news, or you're between treatments and you just need a bit of time to yourself really, there was nowhere. And her vision was somewhere that you could go, or that your friends and family could go, that would be open and welcome. When you go to a Maggie Centre, which are always in the grounds of hospitals, there's no desk, nobody comes up and asks you what you want. The first thing you see, actually, in all of them, is the kettle and a cup of tea, because that's your first route. And then there's lots of information around, and they have advisors to help you with anything from how to deal with insurance problems or whether or not you might like acupuncture. But the main thing is, and their strapline is for anyone affected by the diagnosis of cancer. So they are respites from the hospital, but they are always right next door. And because Maggie herself was a landscape architect, she wanted them to be beautiful. So they're all designed by leading architects. And in fact, the one that I'm most close to in West London is a Richard Rogers design. And it's right onto a really busy road, Fulham Palace Road. And the hospital itself, I think it was modern in about 1973, but it's not modern now. And
I'm
there's
sure it's on
hardly any
Boris's
space.
list to be one of 40 new hospitals, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe it is. So it's got very little space between the hospital block and the road. And when they first said to me, that's where we're going to put the Maggie Centre, I thought, how? But of course, I'm not an architect. And the answer is brilliantly. It's this bright orange building, full of light. There's a beautiful garden surrounding it, designed by Derek Gavin. And there's now, I think, 40 of them. And a couple of them are in other countries. But they are really robust. They're not connected to any particular cancer. You don't have to qualify in any way. And like I say, you often go in and just find someone whose colleague or friend has been newly diagnosed, and they just want to find out how to support them. Or you just might want to take a break from all of that. Yeah. Be somewhere really special and open and hopefully restorative. So I find them extraordinary. Extraordinary.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I hope if you've are interested in that charity, you may consider giving a donation today.
Wow.
What I will be doing, so Janet's signing autographs, is that if you have a photo with Janet today while she's signing, that money, which is £5 per selfie photo, will be donated. I haven't told you that. So
You hadn't?
no, so I will be donating.
Oh, well, could you all just get two?
So yeah, please, please, please.
That's lovely,
Yeah.
because it is very special to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know, but my husband was diagnosed with and then died from cancer 2 years ago. And it was always important, but it became extra important. And there's nothing sentimental about it. I mean, everybody can feel differently about the diagnosis, but John was robust in his. And that's the approach you get from Maggie's. It's just come in, sit down, cup of tea, and here we are.
So please come and see us.
Thank you.
That's fine, no.
That
no.
is
So please come and see us whilst we're signing and come and have a photo, and that money will be donated to Maggie's.
Gosh, thank you. That's really
Yeah.
special. Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
So, we all remember and love you with great fondness from Blue Peter, but how are you coping with the possible demise of the toilet roll, as discussed a few weeks ago on Radio 4? How are you coping?
Well, it's tough, isn't it? Because, you know, what's next? Sticky back plastic?
Washing up bottles are going to go, you know. It's okay, it's all right. It's okay.
I mean, it is a funny thing that everybody responded with this immediate, but Blue Peter, when this company, who actually are probably doing a brilliant thing, saying, let's just cut down on the wastage a bit and have blue rolls without holders, and everybody's first thought was not. Great for the environment. It's Blue Peter we're worried about. But I think the good thing is that I never, obviously I made the mix on the programme, but I never invented them. I can't take any credit for that, and I always give thanks to Margaret Parnell, who thought up 99% of it, and it was extraordinary. But the Blue Peter viewers and people like Margaret are so resourceful. Find something else! Just don't let them come for the sticky back plastic.
Do you still dream of sticky back plastic?
I dream of lots of things that I'd never heard of before I did the programme. I didn't know what a bradawl was. Dowling.
Dowling.
Dowling. Never heard of. But actually, the makes was they were a lovely part of the programme, because Margaret used to send in every make in its constituent parts. So obviously you assemble it. And this is a little trade secret, I never said, here's one I made earlier. I vowed, the programme was 25 years old by the time I joined, so it was already an institution with catchphrases. And I just thought, I'm going to find other ways of saying that, because for a start, I hadn't made it, Margaret had, but also I just thought it was a little bet to myself that I could spend however long I'm on the programme not saying it. But she would send through all these different versions of the make, its constituent parts, gradually assembling. And she'd send 2 or 3 versions, so you could rehearse. And think of her, I've been to Margaret's shed actually, which is neater than the neatest room I've ever been in. It's pretty much a surgery, it doesn't look like a shed, with everything really neat and every tool you could ever want, and loads of inspiration and pictures and collages, and an amazing mind that can look at, I don't know, a margarine tub and go, doll's bath, you know, I mean, it's not given to all of us. But also doing the makes, because we didn't have autocue when I did the Peter. And so you had to learn the script the night before the programme. And with the makes, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to forget it. Because it was all there.
So you would only have the script the night before to learn it for the next day?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. It's funny, isn't it? Because most of us had an acting background. I mean, I did, Pete did, and Simon had never done presenting before, so he didn't know any different. But for the actors, it was kind of what we were used to, but in a much shorter frame.
Yeah.
So I was used to the idea that you learned a script. I was used to working live in theatre, but I certainly wasn't used to the fact that you would then get the script, which we learned, then we do a run-through, usually really late in the day when everybody's thinking, oh, we're going to make it, you know, because we're live. And then after the run-through, if the programme was overrunning, Biddy Baxter, the editor then, would come into the makeup room and give you the cuts and say, no, don't ask that question, which you all had to just hold in your head. I think that's the reason I can't remember anything now. I think I'm used up, frankly.
I know we're at a Doctor Who convention, but I want to ask you about Biddy Baxter. She's this legend of being the most formidable woman ever. What was Biddy like?
The most formidable. No, Biddy was is. I mean, she's going to be 90 next year.
Wow, she's
Still with us. Except, yeah, because my vision, before I ever met her, watching her name come up on the credits, was frankly a little old woman, you know, somebody in a cardigan maybe, type perm. Biddy is honestly the most elegant woman I've ever met.
See, in my mind, Biddy Baxter, when I used to see that name coming up, I used to think Margaret Rutherford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think away from that.
Yeah.
Biddy is tall. I mean, I'm not sure, but you know, she's still tall. Tall. She had yards of blonde hair, up in an immaculate French pleat, amazing earrings, beautiful outfits. I mean, the Harvey Nichols and Liberty empty when she walked past. She was so well dressed, and always wearing stiletto heels, so she was super tall. She loved the programme beyond anything else. And when I joined the programme, I think I was the 13th presenter. I had a meeting with her, obviously, Rennie Rye, who went on to direct Books of Delights and did other things subsequently, and Edward Barnes, who was then the head of children's programmes. And they sort of sat me down and said, this is going to be great, you know, it's really exciting, it's the best programme to be in, the best programme to present, but it will be here when you're gone. I mean, that was the message. You are not the programme. And actually that was really useful, because it's still there, you know, it still exists, and so does Biddy. But she absolutely kept the programme going. And I think it is her ethos is the reason it is still on air, because, as I say, with a programme that's been going a long time, I mean, I think it has another birthday, I think it's 65 this year, there's a tendency to kind of play to the gallery of it. You know a lot of your viewers will be older, in all the appreciation societies and universities. But the programme was aimed at 8 to 12 year olds, and it stayed aimed at that age group. So it never tried to kind of, you know, do anything over the heads of kids watching it. And I think that was one of the many reasons for its success. And, you know, people like Biddy, who were never going to say, this is a great programme, just go and do it how you want. You know, after every single programme, if you got even the tiniest thing wrong, and frankly, even at a stage when you didn't know you got something wrong, she'd just come up and say, it was 1843, not 1842. Oh. But actually, I really respected that. And if somebody had just gone after every single programme, totally brilliant, you know, everybody relaxes in the wrong way. You know, and she loved it, and she was really good with us, and she celebrated the success of the programme too. But she was an absolute stickler, because I'd never done any presenting before. She was the person who taught me, and all of us, how to do it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I want to take you back to going to drama school.
Yeah?
What would you say was the greatest thing drama school taught you or prepared you for?
I think that it should go like Whooverville now, shouldn't it? Like effective
Yeah.
films. Whoa, back to 1974, I believe it was, I just wanted to be where people thought like me. I wanted to be an actress since before I really knew what it meant. I think I was about 5 when I first studied. My dad was in the army. My mum had been a nurse, and she then became an army wife, which in those days meant you did nothing else. So there was nothing in my family that was anything to do with the profession at all. But I knew that's where I wanted to be, so every single thing I ever did was kind of geared to that, you know, from volunteer, I must have been that, volunteering to Regional Assembly every possible time, joining every possible drama club, doing my languages. I just had this real focus, which in some ways actually is great, because it means even as a child, the decisions you make, you think, well, I know which way I'm going, so that, I'm going to be doing that. But yeah, getting into Central, which is now the Royal Central, it wasn't then, it was Central, meant that somebody else agreed with me that it was what I should be doing at that stage, you know, obviously you're training, and that I was going to be able to watch other people and be with other people who were as nonsensically obsessed with acting as me. So we could talk to each other, and we did, into the wee small hours, and be amongst it.
Am I right in thinking you had to defer a year going to drama school, is that right?
No, oh, well, sort of, yeah. I left school, I just done my O-levels, because that's when this was, and I was going to do A-levels, and in my first term of A-levels, I had what I thought was a real revelation. What am I doing in a school when I should be in a drama school? the acting profession needs me, so I left school straight away. I mean, looking back, my parents were pretty cool about that, because again, they had no idea. You know, all you ever hear when you say you want to act is, not many people make it. You know, 75% of the profession are out of work. You've got to think, poor them, I'm going to be in the other quarter, okay? But they were really supportive. I mean, I think they thought that there was still time if I changed my mind or it didn't work out. You know, I was only 17. And you had to be 17 to audition for drama schools. So I did audition for drama schools, and all of them was, you're too young. Go away, live a little. But I didn't actually audition for Central that time. I auditioned for RADA and Lambda and Mother Douglas, and they all gave me a free audition next time, which is important, because it was like £5 each time.
It's very expensive now.
Really, it's the equivalent actually. I mean, it's not a cheap deal. And but when I went into Central, I just thought, this is the one. It felt kind of sensible, as well as being really, you know, you could explore and do what you want there. And it was so tiny then. I mean, there were only ever 10 girls and 20 boys in each year. No more, and they never took more girls because that reflected the employment ratio. And there were only, in fact, my year there were 28, and that meant that you really got to know the people in the year above and below you as well. And Carrie Fisher was in my year.
Who's that?
Oh, she was so lovely. She was just a lovely, lovely girl. But it was just that thing of feeling, this is a path, you know, whatever happens next, this is the gate I should have walked through, you know. And I was really lucky because I got an agent in the last shout of the last term, and then was working 3 weeks later, so I was really lucky.
And one of your earliest things that you did before Blue Peter, and it was presenting as well, was Jigsaw.
Yeah.
So working with future Doctor Who, Sylvester McCoy.
And David Rappaport.
And David Rappaport as the Omen.
Yeah.
And Clive Doyle.
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
That came about because I would always say that I wasn't presenting them. It was a puzzle game.
Yeah.
For anyone who hasn't, why haven't you? And anyone who hasn't seen Jigsaw, it was a little puzzle game of a 6-letter word, and we gave various clues, usually in sketch form, and it was dressing up games basically. And Clive, this is the reason I still have a photo of it, saw my photo in Spotlight, and then I went to audition. I mean, obviously saw other people in Spotlight too, but I don't think my Spotlight photo has ever been used since. But you kind of still have to keep it going. There's still a chance that somebody could still see my photo now. And when I went for the audition to meet Clive, I had only just had Sophie. Sophie was 8 weeks old when I auditioned and 11 weeks old when I started work.
Wow.
But because I was only 23, I thought I was just clever. Had a baby and be working.
Well, you were.
Well, looking back now, when it was Sophie was 25 when she had Sonny, and then went off on tour. And as her mother, I was going, just be careful. But obviously she was like me. She just went, just had a baby. It's clever. I'm just going to work now.
You just mentioned Sophie. You must be so proud of her. What she has achieved and gone on. A worldwide pop star, and also during the lockdown, her kitchen disco,
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
It is.
And how do you cope with all the grandkids?
Well, I think there's, the last time I looked, there were 5 of them, but who knows,
Yeah, there might be another one
There might be
later.
another. In fact, I left, this is a really little tiny domestic fact. I left my dog with Sophie very early this morning because there was no one else to look after her, and so Sophie opened the door. Still, obviously Mickey, her youngest, had been up since way before I thought, but anyway, that's where Angela, the dog, is today. Because later Sophie set up in the park locally too. I think what was great about Kitchen Disco is that it was never meant to be what it turned out to be. A kind of, wow, so let's do a tour based on it. None of that. I remember when lockdown first hit, and how strange all that still is and very much was. And she said to me, I can't do what I do. You know, what I do is I'm a singer, I perform, and I can't do it. So I think I'm just going to do a sort of once a week thing in the house where, you know, obviously Richard, her husband, is incredibly, as well as being a bass player, and by the way, an amateur pilot, but he's also very technically minded. And she said, I think you can set it up to do a kind of disco thing. And I seriously imagined she meant they would just spin some tracks. What I didn't realise is that she would be in full zhuzh, including heels, every week, and Mickey was a really tiny baby. But actually it was, for us it was lovely too, because, you know, we couldn't even see each other then. So I could keep track of them, apart from FaceTime. And it just caught that mood, didn't it, of people thinking the only saving grace in all of this otherwise dreadful time is that we are all linked together, and we are therefore once a week, 6:30 on Friday, we are connected, and I did find that really heartwarming. Yeah,
definitely.
it really was. It still is, yeah. And the blooming 24-hour disco thing. Because obviously, you know, Sophie is, I notice, a grown woman, and she is, you know, very much, her energy is phenomenal, and she's very much in charge of what she does. And there's very few times when I feel worried about her. You know, occasionally I know she hasn't had a great week, and I know she's going to do something, but, you know, I know she was going to be fine on stage. But when she said she was going to do that, I thought, how's that going to feel, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning when you really haven't had a break? And she said, I don't know. And I said, oh, I could come along, you know. And she said, well, most of the slots are filled. You know, Ryland's coming, or whatever. But there's nobody coming on at, I think it was like 3 in the morning. And I said to her, oh, darling, I'm really not going to be much use to you at 3 in the morning, you know, because I'll be barely awake. Because it was all obviously on camera as well. So I said, why don't I come along for sort of, you know, about 7:30 and then just keep you going over the last bit. So that's what we decided. But of course I might as well have been there, because I did not sleep that night. Because I was, first of all, I was watching her, and then I was watching her to make sure she was okay. She was really okay. She was. So the worst bit was the last hour. And it wasn't mentally, it was physically, because she had a little break on every hour, like 5 minutes, when the brilliant physio, you know, would just get hold of her and go, you're fine, get out, go out. He was such a lovely guy. But she said after the last hour, when she got up, she actually couldn't get up. She was just so knackered. And he really got her up and said, this will be the worst hour, because all through it, people will be telling you what time it is. They'll be going, oh, it's only 55, 40 minutes, and that will be worse, because they haven't been doing that up till now. You know, that will feel like the longest hour of the night.
Well, it's like, I suppose it's like a marathon when you see like 2 kilometres go, 1 kilometre.
I imagine. No.
Need a minute.
No. I imagine.
So, Doctor Who. How did you get the part on Doctor Who, and what are your memories of the director, Kenny McLean?
Kenny McLean, honestly one of the nicest people I've ever met. And he died so tragically young. Again, it was an audition, you know, so you just went along. In those days, the BBC used to have a room in what they called one of their upper houses, which was onto Shepherd's Bush Green, and you go along and you see all the other girls who look like you waiting outside, and you prepared you a little bit. But I did really, really want to do it. And it wasn't because I felt it would be, you know, kind of a good thing on my CV. It's just that it is, and it still is. It's an actor's program. You know, you are given a really good part. There's nothing dismissive about it. People aren't going to say, oh, you know, silly script, but it's Doctor Who. Really good writers. You know, Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and things, was our script editor. And there was always a sense that you were making something really proper. You know, again, the intended audience, mostly children, that is going to be watched by a whole load of people, that make sure it's good for them, because this is it, isn't it? This is why we're all here. Because those programmes mattered then, and they matter now, because of the quality of them. And because yes, you're playing a character from a fictitious galaxy, and yes, you're involved in stories with monsters who in the rehearsal room, sorry if this is a spoiler, but they were actually just actors.
You're joking.
I know, sorry. I've got a thunderbolt to strike.
You just spoiled it for everyone.
I'm going to go on and spoil it even more and say exactly what the Naimons were like. But there was this sense that, you know, it was an acting role. There was nothing, you couldn't phone it in. Everybody was really good. You know, people like Graham Crowden. I mean, you can learn so much. Plus, of course, Tom Baker.
Yeah.
I mean, just extraordinary man. Extraordinary man. And a fund of amazing anecdotes from his time at the National, the RSC, or wherever else he worked. But if a child came into view, he became Doctor Who forever. No matter how many hours he'd been rehearsing, no matter what the context. And I thought that star quality was really so proper.
And the Horns and Naimon, we just touched upon the guest cast of Graham Crowden, Malcolm Terrace,
Yeah.
and I can't say Malcolm Terrace's name without going, weakling scum! And the lovely Simon Gibson.
Simon Gibson, yeah.
I mean, what are your memories of those gents?
Well, yes, so just saying their names,
Yeah.
you know. And by the way, weakling scum, all of you. But just saying, you know, going into a rehearsal room with those people, and also, yes, great parts, yes, great scripts, yes, fantastic programme, but also such fun. I mean, they were having fun. They were really having fun. And Graham Crowden was absolutely adorable, just so lovely, and never made, I mean, it must have been only about my third or fourth job, you know, but there was no sense of, you know, stand back, watch this, ever. And Simon was a lovely boy, really lovely boy. And it was just, yeah, the only thing was that Tom Baker and Nana Ward were getting together at that point. They weren't married. And that meant having spectacular rows. The length of the rehearsal room, and of course 2 seconds later they were making up equally spectacularly. But it was so full on, their relationship, so full on. And in fact, when I went and recorded the director's cut, you know, for the DVD, with Lala, you know, and she said, I'm so sorry about the rows. Because they really were humbling us.
Or to being a fly on the wall for those.
I know, really, yeah.
Your costume. Your costume was designed by the legendary Doctor Who designer June Hudson.
I've had words with June about
Yes, you have had words, because I remember the Zoom chat.
Yes, exactly. It was on parallel curtains, I mean, honestly, June, what was she thinking? It was the sort of costume that it did not move, basically. You could stand inside it, but it didn't flex at all. It was like gold material with a big wide cloud, and it was like that thing in The Sound of Music where she says, I'm going to make a costume out of these curtains. It's upholstery fabric. She's admitted this. It was upholstery fabric. Because when we were all wearing them, and all, you know, on camera together, it did look very effective. The show is clean, you know, but yeah, I've told you all this. I've got a sort of apology. I think I did.
Yeah, you did, yeah. And what was your initial reaction to the Naimon? How many Naimon have you seen today?
Are they here?
No. Somebody would have got the reference in the audience. It was one of the running gags and jokes in the story.
Oh,
Because
yes, what do you mean?
there was only supposed to be one Naimon, but there were three.
There were three.
Two.
There were three. Yeah, there were three. And actually, they were played by very tall, sort of bodybuilder stuntmen. But even so, the Naimons were taller than that.
They were big
So they were on
heels.
big lift. But in rehearsal, they have that thing, you know, when you're little and you make stilts out of flower pots.
Mhm.
That's what they rehearsed with. That's what they rehearsed with. And because, despite the fact they were big, tall guys, they weren't the actors. So the actors who were voicing the Naimon would follow behind them. So there's these big guys on their flat, and running behind them are much shorter actors, because most actors are short. Much shorter actor saying the lines. So probably half the reason why the episodes worked so well is because you have to concentrate like anything, because initially you kind of want to laugh a bit. You're being menaced by somebody wearing a flower pot. and there was a fantastic effect with a collapsing body, you know, so they were keeping people prisoner in these kind of capsule things. And there was a body set up. And I think, because my dad, weirdly enough, after he left the army, went to work in visual effects for the BBC. I got him that job, actually. So there's this collapsing body, and you had to touch it, and the whole thing just faded to dust. And, you know, it's a kind of inflation thing. And the reason I say I got him the job is because he really wanted to go into model making. And he was working for a company called Mclean, who made, because the BBC outsourced it, who made one of the TARDISes. They made Daleks, you know, so I've got those photos of me and my sister inside Daleks. And then, when I was doing Doctor Who, the guy who was then in charge of visual effects, Pete Pegram, said to me, I've met your dad a few times, you know, and I think he would be great here. So what he could do is apply for what they used to call a holiday contract, which was a 3-month contract. With the BBC, was almost like a trial period, really. And I went to tell my dad, and that's what happened. And it's so lovely. He was so happy there. It was perfect.
One of the things that your dad designed was the robot in Trial of Time Wars.
Yes.
And you got to interview your dad on Blue Peter.
I did, second time lucky, because the first time I was supposed to be interviewing him, I had a parachuting accident. I broke my pelvis. I ended up in hospital. I missed one programme, and of that one programme, they got Sarah Green back in to interview my dad. That's still unfair, actually. Yeah, second time I did interview him. I think we were both quite nervous. Yeah. It was not our usual relationship.
It's a lovely thing to watch.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Are there any questions from the audience?
How many more secrets can we reveal?
Yes, sir.
I kind of had one, but I think Janet's kind of answered it, which is obviously the costume you had to wear. But maybe turn it a little bit sideways. And obviously Lala had such a beautiful outfit. Did you have outfit envy with hers?
You bet, yeah. And also looking like Lala wearing it, envy, because, you know, you've got a beautiful girl and amazing. Yeah, her costume was great. Because I think that combination of the two of them as well, especially costume-wise, and quite apart from the chemistry, was so effective. You know, Tom with his so distinctive flowing coat and the massive scarf and hat, and you know, he was just, you know, you almost felt you could do a little sketch, tiny sketch using hardly any lines for both of them. And the same with that amazing sort of riding habits. And just, yeah, it was witty. And I think, despite the fact that I obviously had issues with moving around in my actual costume, they were always a touch of wit. You know, there was something about them that made you think there was huge affection for the programme in every department that worked on it. You know, it was a lovely thing for people to do, and they were adding to their CVs, but they really got involved. There was absolutely no one I met throughout the course of it who gave any impression of being like, a bit bored or wanting to be somewhere else or just a stepping stone, you know, which is really rare, really rare. Yeah, it was. It was such fun.
Yes, sir.
Talk about making things. Do you have one you remember, memorable one maybe?
Well, I remember one for one of the wrong reasons. It was, and if there are any dads here, obviously I have to go out of the room now, because it was a present for Father's Day. And it was a sort of tool holder made from a bleach bottle. So first of all, you know, you had to really detox this thing, because obviously you don't want any element of, it was domestos. I never said that on it. And it wasn't, bless her Margaret, it wasn't the most practical one she'd ever designed, because it only really worked when it was full of tools. I mean, it was fine if you took one out, but in the building process for this thing, you know, if you put one screwdriver in, it would topple over. So I had, obviously you don't want to give that away. I mean, it was weighted, you know, I can't remember what we put in the bottom, sand probably, but it was weighted, but, you know, it was a little bit. But, you know, on air, you don't want people going, oh God, it doesn't work. You know, so it would work with a full kit of tools, and that's what you would be saying to put in it for Father's Day. But in the rehearsal, I mocked it. I mocked it, and it fell over a bit, and all the crew laughed, you know, about me mocking this bleach bottle, not up to scratch at all. And Biddy was epic. You did. And, you know, she just came down, and this is, you know, in the bit between, and because it was the sort of programme it was, and because of the time scale involved, everything that happened to you happened in front of everybody. You know, there was no taking you to one side, there was no time, there was no side to take you to. So she came in, you know, to the makeup room and just really said, you've got to take it seriously all the time. You know, it's not up to you to find fun in this. So that one for the wrong reasons, but there were, I mean, the Christmas ones I always loved. I mean, I was stuck up for glitter anyway, so anything you can sparkle up. And then there was one I really liked where you just planted cress into funny faces on lid rolls and had them grow up the top of her hair. And those kind of things, for a child, there's such an instant result. And we never ever said, you have to make this perfect. You know, that all the stages were designed to be really easy and flexible and using what you had, and it didn't matter if yours looked a bit wonky. And that was part of the charm, but I just really like doing them. Really like doing them.
I want to just pick up on the Blue Peter thing again. Not only did you do all the makes and interviewing people, you did so many different amazing things. I mean,
I surprised myself with what I did.
am I right in thinking you had the world record at one stage for jumping out of an airplane?
I did. For a very brief time, and not long enough to get into the Guinness Book of Records, which is a shame, I held the world civilian brackets female high altitude record, because I jumped out of the plane at 25,000 feet.
What was that like?
Well, I'm not doing it again. The whole thing with the parachuting actually was really funny, because I think several other presenters have done it since. I'm not surprised, because it's high value. But I was the first person to do it since John Noakes, so there was quite a gap. And it was the same director filming it, Alex Leger. So we absolutely recreated what John Noakes had done, with a significant difference, that he was a fearless bloke and I was a scared woman. So the films were the same in content, but you always had me going, I don't think so. But actually, I know when I was asked to do it, and you know, despite what you may have heard, we were never forced to do anything. You know, there was no, you signed up for this. You know, and they were saying, we'd love to make the films, we'd love to make them again with you because it would be such a contract. And Pete Duncan has never forgiven me for this because he really wanted to do it. But there was something about doing something that was so personally out, not just out of my comfort zone, but out of every comfort zone I've ever been in. Because I hated physical stuff at school, I wasn't very good at it, I didn't like games, I wasn't brave, I don't like heights. And I thought, you know, they knew all this, and I kind of thought, but if I do it, it really will be every woman. You know, I will never be asked not to be scared, because that, again, with the films, we could genuinely be ourselves. There's no room for a margin of hiding your fear when you're jumping out of something anyway. So I've never done a tandem jump or anything like that. Every jump I did was solo. And I did the military progression, so it was from a static balloon through to a side of a Hercules in a stick of men, through to going up in lighter aircraft and jumping from first 3, then 8, then 12. And all the time, hugely spread out, because most people, I did 33 jumps in all, not all of them were filmed at all. But to a keen parachute person, they'd like to do that in a week, and mine was spread over 3 years. So I never lost the fear of it. But equally, I never lost that feeling of, I kind of want to do it. I want to be on the other side of it more than I'm scared of doing it. Because every time I do this, you know, there may be some person thinking, look, you don't have to do the parachuting, because stuff is possible even if you're scared of it. Yeah, so the last one, it was all free playing on oxygen, which makes a big difference, not nearly so scary. and when I landed, I just thought, okay, we're done now, that's great. And yeah, they sort of went, no, you've got the record. And then some woman went up higher almost a week later. Okay, well, I'm happy to let that go. But it was an extraordinary thing to do. And a lot of them were like that, a lot of the films. And all credit to the programme, that there was no possibility that girls did these films and boys did those. I mean, it didn't even occur to them to divide things up like that at all, which was forward thinking.
Yes, very quickly.
Oh yeah,
How would you describe your relationship with your fellow Blue Beat presenters at the time?
Hated it. You know what? I'm always aware when I answer questions about the others. But I've obviously, in the course of the years since, I've met loads of other Blue Beat presenters. I mean, I can't remember what the tally is now, but 13 years ago, and without being daft about this, for a lot of people, it was a programme they did, and they obviously they don't mind being asked about it, but they regarded it as very much part of their history, and they probably had a nice time doing some of it. I was unbelievably lucky that with everybody I worked with, and that actually includes Sarah, who I took over from, we are all still in touch. I was particularly close to Karen. She was godmother to my youngest. And I kept in touch with Michael Sundin after he left. But with Pete and Simon and Mark, I see them all. I mean, it sounds really twee, but I see them all the time.
A few years ago, there was the reunion play, which took place up in Chiswick and then went up to Edinburgh Fringe, but sadly didn't go on tour.
I know, it was meant to. It was meant to. Yeah, who knows? It's 65 next year, maybe they'll resurrect it. But, and I've become friends with people I didn't work on, like Tim Vincent on the programme. And I just think how lucky, because we started, we did the programme live twice a week, so that's a big commitment. And if you're turning up to work and you see your friends, you actually think, this is great. And I like to think, and I hope I'm right, that we didn't let our friendship dominate. We loved being together, but it wasn't a party that you weren't invited to on screen. I really hope we got that right. But I do feel really lucky, because like I say, it doesn't, it's not obligatory, it doesn't necessarily come with the territory, and obviously I've done loads of other jobs since. I had a lovely time, but you kind of think, oh yeah, I did that, but I don't, haven't seen him for ages. But Vivita is really special to me because it was the one where I made firm friends, and I really valued that for the programme and for me. But like I say, it wasn't, I hope, to the detriment of anything we were doing. There were no in-jokes on screen ever, and we never, sort of tried to make each other laugh or, silly stuff around, well, maybe sometimes. But, we didn't, the programme was key for all of us, and that really, first of all, it got us together, and then it united us when we were working. So, how lucky, how freaking lucky.
On the subject of being lucky, I think we're all very lucky to be with you today. Ladies and gentlemen, Jan Ellis. Just to say that Janice is only here until 2:30, so if you are going to get autographs and a photograph with her, a selfie, which the money's been donated to Maggie's, please come and see us up on the down on the first floor in the digital studio. Thank you.
Thanks, Janice Ellis. Thank you.